lobby. Let's all go to the lobby, lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Hello, horror hounds, and welcome to Now Slaying, an It's Slay's podcast production where we break down the latest and greatest in the world of horror. I'm your not-so-humble host, Colton.
I'm Rowan.
And today on the show, we're going to be reviewing Night Swim, which was released January 4th, 2024, exclusively in theaters. So, Rowan, it's the beginning of the new year, and as per usual, we have another Blumhouse horror release to look forward to, and with that, I just want to know, were you looking forward to Night Swim?
I was intrigued. It kind of was giving me vibes of a movie we never actually talked about, but Fall, where it takes one of my greatest fears and creates it into a movie. And Fall was one that I just brushed aside when it was in the theater, never went to it, saw it at home, scared me to death just because I'm afraid of heights. So I don't know if I've ever said on any of these episodes, but I can't swim and I'm scared of water, to death of water.
Okay, no, I never knew that. I thought you were going to be particularly afraid of night swimming. Which
well, that could be even more...
It's niche, you know?
That could be even more terrifying. Now, I'm not so scared, I do shower. I just can't swim. I have, a panic attack if I'm in, a lake or, even a pool. It takes me a while to get used to a pool if I can't stand up in it.
Oh, okay.
So I was kind of pumped because I was you know what? Maybe this is, Blumhouse is going to scare me and this is going to play in on my fear.
Okay.
What about you? Were you looking forward to Night Swim?
I can swim and, I'm not particularly afraid of water and I also shower. But what I'll say about this is I was cautiously looking forward to it after the first teaser trailer, which was just kind of like the woman in the pool. It's actually kind of now in hindsight after I've watched the movie and the short film, it's kind of almost more like the short film than the actual movie. So after seeing just that, and basically it was the first time I heard of this movie, I was looking forward to it a little bit. But once they started releasing the longer trailers, 2 and 3 minutes long, and we kind of set on our looking forward at the year in horror for 2024, I was kind of saying, how are they going to keep making these people go back swimming? And how are they going to keep getting I don't know, eaten by this entity or whatever is happening in the pool? So it was just the sort of thing as it was coming up, I wasn't really looking forward to it anymore because it just seemed like it was going to be dumb. That being said, it is produced by James Wan. And we're celebrating WANUARY here on the podcast. So I was like, well, it is coming out at a good time for us at least. And then also, Blumhouse and Atomic Monster just merged.
Yeah.
So they're like a huge horror production company now. So it's just kind of it's interesting to announce this merger and then release this movie, So I was like, oh, maybe it is going to be, a great flick. Maybe it's going to be, another surprise horror of the year. So I will say that it was I don't know, a roller coaster, whether or not I was looking forward to this one.
Yeah, I was going to say, I felt like I was on a roller coaster.
Okay.
I'll talk briefly about my theater experience on this. It was wild. Okay. So we got there. I didn't buy any tickets in advance because I look at the seats. They're all empty. So I looked a couple hours ahead. I'm like, sweet. Mm-hmm. It's Thursday. I'm in a small town. So Thursday isn't busy anyway. So I'm I'm probably going to be the only guy that goes pre-opening night to go see Night Swim. Mm-hmm. So I get there. My middle seats are taken because people have actually bought seats. And by people, I mean, there was probably 10 people other than me in the theater. So the entire film, whether scary or not, there was a couple on a date that were probably 30, 40. This woman screamed at full capacity, anything. It could be night changing the day, she screamed. And it was just full break your eardrum screaming at any and every musical cue, anything. And it was wild because I think most of the experience was just everyone in the theater laughing at her the entire time.
Excellent. My theater experience was basically a little different. It was in a very small theater because I happened to go see this the Tuesday afternoon after this movie came out because I was a little bit late getting back in the town, some bad weather and whatnot. But essentially where I was seated, I had my seat kind of dead center, but closer to the front.
Yeah.
Just almost at the partition where it goes down to you're sitting on the floor essentially. And where I was seated, I had a group of special needs people, just one row in front of me. And what I will say is that they were just incredibly disruptive, like, once the movie started. I don't know if they actually wanted to go see the movie or if maybe it was just, like, an outing that kind of, like, their handler planned. But they were very noisy, very disruptive, like, through no fault of their own. But it was just kind of like, I was like, okay, I can't sit here and watch the movie. So then I moved, which I usually don't ever do in the movie. So I moved further up into the theater, and I sat down, and all I could smell was puke. And I kind of looked over my shoulder, and I could tell that, like, just back the row behind me, like, was, like, freshly cleaned recently.
Oh, nice.
And it was just, like, just reeked of puke. So then I had to get up for a second time and move again. So then my third and final spot where I sat, I was like, okay, I'm way in the back, like, off to the left-hand side. And, you know, when I was back there, all I had to deal with was, like, somebody, like, I don't know, loudly eating food and clinking stuff. And I was like, okay, whatever. This is a normal movie experience now. But it wasn't very full for a Tuesday afternoon. I had like 6 or 7 people in there outside of, you know, the group of people down in front that were viewing the movie. But yeah, it was just, I don't know, it's a bit of a theater experience. And once the movie started, it was basically like a crypt. I don't think there was really any reactions at all from the audience the entire time. So was this the best showcase for what Atomic Monster and Blumhouse can accomplish together? Well, before we get that, let's dive into the trailer.
Okay, Marco.
Hello.
Marco. Ronan, Marco. Marco.
There's something bad in the water, and it's after all of us.
Marco.
Night Swim, January 5th, rated PG-13.
What you just heard is from Night Swim, written and directed by Bryce McGuire, and the story is as follows. Forced into early retirement by a degenerative illness, former baseball player Ray Waller moves into a new house with his wife and 2 children. He hopes that the backyard swimming pool will be fun for the kids and provide physical therapy for himself. However, a dark secret from the home's past soon unleashes a malevolent force that drags the family into the depths of inescapable terror. Now, here on Now Slaying, we like to keep things relatively spoiler-free up front before getting into the more in-depth spoiler-filled discussion. So, Rowan, what are your spoiler-free thoughts on Night Swim?
So I told Colton from the get-go, I was like, I didn't write any notes on this one, but I can tell all the listeners it is a film with water and a pool in it. Okay. Whether or not they try to produce the most scares out of this pool, I don't know. It kind of catches you off guard, this one. I'm trying to think without spoiling, but this is one that isn't necessarily, you're not getting your jump scares from the pool, which is kind of weird.
What are you getting jump scares from at all?
Well, let me reiterate that. You're not getting jump scares, period.
Okay.
This is like a sports family drama featuring a pool in the background. They chose the subject of baseball, which even my minor sports bro brain, like, doesn't register baseball. I have no interest in baseball.
Neither do I.
I don't really know anything. Like, they're talking about his position and stuff, and I'm like, is this important? I'm not sure. Apparently the team they mentioned, I looked it up, it's a real team. It's like a bad team, so how good is he? I mean, better than me at baseball, but
that's an interesting detail, because I was wondering, they were looking just to rent and not purchase, and like once again, I'm not very familiar with baseball, but one thing we all know about if you're playing any professional sports, you know, most of the time you're making bank.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like, wait, this guy was a professional baseball player for years upon years, well enough that like people know his name and that it was like tragedy. So I was like, how can he only afford to rent a home? Anyways, I understand that the housing market is messed up, but yeah, it was a weird detail.
My understanding was I think he was kind of more of a journeyman. So he was kind of like not really a star baseball player.
Okay. He wasn't there yet.
He was just kind of like, you know, I don't know. Like I said, I don't know anything about baseball. But
second or third draft pick or something like that. I don't know.
You know, he's just like a bench guy. I kind of got the feeling that they bounced around a lot. So he must have been in a lot of trades. Like teams didn't necessarily want to keep him.
Anyone who knows baseball right now is just
they're
cringing. Yeah, they're punching sand. Yeah.
I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry. I'm really interested to get your thoughts on, like, the family in total, because I'm not really sure I cared about anybody in this family throughout the entire film. Like I said, a lot of this is playing as, like, this sports drama about MS, and, like, I didn't feel a connection between, like, the parents and the children and themselves, the parents and themselves. Like, to me, it was just like, hey, a bunch of people showed up for a paycheck and a random Blumhouse horror movie.
Yeah, I'd kind of agree with that. And the sad part about it is a lot of kind of the third act really only works if you're really invested in the family and kind of know them intimately. Like, for example, they mention about how the son, Elliot, has a lot of issues. And I'm just kind of like, what issues? Like, he's just a kind of like an introverted kid. Like, they don't really show him getting like bullied at school or like, even having problems making friends. They mention it like offhandedly. But it's like he goes to baseball practice, he hits the ball, people cheer for him and whatnot. He's not like getting bullied. No one thinks he's a loser. So I was just kind of like wondering, like, what problems is he having? And then, like, even, like, the older sister, like, obviously she's, like, a more popular girl and, like, kind of, trying to put the moves on, like, one of the star, I don't know, swimming athletes at the school. But I was just like, okay, like, she's a teenage girl interested in boys. Where's the drama here? Any drama from this movie is from Wyatt Russell's, like, father. And even him, just basically through the plot of the movie, we don't really see how, like, the MS actually affects him. So it's like, he's having issues like, let's say, walking in the beginning of the movie or like closing his hand fully. But after about 15 minutes, just once again, due to what this pool does, the narrative kind of expands and we don't really see any degradation. He's just fine for the rest of the movie. So there's like no drama in this family unit. And basically anything that you need to know in the third act is set up just through like a conversation where it's like, I don't know, it'd be like, oh, Rowan, are you afraid of water? And you'd be like, yes, I'm very afraid of water. So in the next scene, we know how scared Rowan is of water. That's essentially how this movie functions. And none of it is very like well developed, I don't think, as the family unit.
Well, and I didn't like some of the like random choices I didn't really understand. Like, you're talking about the daughter, and obviously she's got kind of this love interest, and he's like this swim star, but it's like he's not the swim star of the school swim team. He's the swim star of the Christian swim group.
Oh, okay. I missed that detail.
Yeah, like on the flyer she picks up, it is the Christian swim team that she's like auditioning for, which would make sense, I guess, if this was like a Christian school or something. I'm not sure if you're from a Christian school that like all your sports teams are identified as like, well, this is the Christian basketball team.
Yeah.
All the bad kids play on like the satanic one. Like, yeah, it was just like weird choice. Like it's never really brought up. It's never, they don't deal with this at all.
Yeah, so I missed that detail, but did you say she was also trying to try out for the swim team? Was that like a plot thing that was mentioned early
which
in the movie?
Totally gets thrown out. Well, this is kind of like what you're talking about when you're like, hey, I'm scared of water. Let's set up the next scene. Because she gets the flyer. The cute boy gives it to her. And then we see, like she's swimming in the pool all the time because she's trying to like get her laps in at home or something.
Oh, God, I don't even remember her swimming in the pool.
Yeah.
I remember them playing a game of Marco Polo, but the people swimming in the pool is like the mother seems to be doing laps and the father at one point.
And
like,
her friends are like also they've got like jackets on or something. Like they are part of the swim team. Like she's trying to infiltrate the swim
I feel like
life.
we saw a different movie. I don't even remember these details. I saw this movie an hour ago.
Yeah, well, we didn't see a different movie because that's it. That's all there is to say about it. Because none of these threads go anywhere. Because it's, as you said, the real issue is that this movie has like one thing to set up. Is that this
just one thing, and you're waiting the entire movie for anything to happen with it.
The pool is scary. And that's all we really need to know. And, when we get into the spoiler section, like, it's kind of interesting because I thought threads towards the end actually would have worked if the overall movie was better and did some different things. Because there were things that, even though I might have not been getting jump scared or anything like this, I was like, oh, like, this is kind of like cool. This is the kind of movie I want to see.
Yeah, there are ways at which this movie could have expanded beyond just this specific pool. You know, that could have made, like, let's say if there was a scene at like a swim team meet or something, it could have made different scenes pretty neat. Or also even expand to other bodies of water that isn't explicitly a swimming pool that, once again, could have made sense in the kind of like the logic of this world that they're setting up. But yeah, basically this movie is horror in this very specific swimming pool. And I want to get back to kind of one of the early things you said where you were like, I don't know if they do a great job of horror in the pool or not, but what I will say is they toy with ideas of pool horror pretty well in it. Like, there's like, I don't know, let's say a scene of like a kid underneath a diving board, and then up above him you hear someone on the diving board and no one's there. Or it's the classic thing of like getting your hair caught in the drain, or, you know, some stuff like that. So there were kind of some interesting ideas, and every now and then even a good shot to go with that interesting idea, which I was like, okay, this is pretty decent. But outside of that, I don't think this movie really has much horror to it at all. For me, there's a scene involving like an older Asian lady, probably like once you're getting close to like the third act of the movie, that I thought was like, okay, I've seen kind of this thing before, but specifically the way her face worked and contorted, I was like, okay, it's a little unsettling. Like, it's something that I can at least point to and like, yeah, she did a good job. And then outside of that, there's one scene that, you know, speaking vaguely to it, it involves kind of like a deeper swim that I could understand how kind of some of these horror things that they were pulling at could have worked better if the movie wasn't so like dimly lit. I couldn't really see anything, in the way that scene particularly was edited was really sloppy as well. So it was like, oh, there was some good stuff here that they were pulling at, but they never really completely nailed. But even with that, I think the main thing is this movie just feels incredibly derivative as well. Like, it owes so much to like other movies that you've seen.
Yeah.
There was loads of It in this when I was watching that it just kept reminding me of the It remake, that I was just like, oh, you can't have like a little boy with a boat and then reaching into, you know, a drain trying to get a toy back, like, without instantly evoking like Pennywise and Georgie and the drain. And it was just like, oh, way, way, way better. So it's just like, when you're doing stuff like that, that's incredibly annoying. And then also this movie pretty blatantly also references a pretty prestigious horror movie of the last 10 years that I don't want to say because it is a spoiler, but it's the sort of thing in the spoiler discussion we'll mention it. I'm just like, you can't really evoke that movie in this sort of movie. Like, it's I don't know, it was very sloppily done. Also, like, the movie's just not scary. There's basically no kills in this movie. There's like a missing pet is like the extent of what you'll get in this movie for an hour and a half. Like, that's it. And like any kills, you know, to say like outside of the opening scene, which I will say is pretty good, and that's what almost feels like what the short film is, like just essentially one person in a pool as like scary shit's happening. Outside of that, there's really nothing to this movie. It's just people coming over, going for a swim, a bunch of reasons to get in the pool, and then every now and then someone will, you know, stay underwater a little bit too long, or someone will vanish for a second, or the lights will go out in the pool. Like, that's basically all there is to it. So yeah, it was just kind of dull.
You know what? One of my like positive points for it, I thought some of the licensed music was all right. It had a little synth, had like some pretty like synth bubblegum poppy songs and stuff, but you know, kind of stuff that I would suspect a teenage girl that maybe had a better musical taste would listen to. So I was all right with that. But I was also pretty disappointed with the actual score. I didn't think the actual score was very good, which would it have, like, you know, fully saved this movie? Probably not, but it probably couldn't hurt it to have like some sort of memorable horror score or something that tried to cue up, you know, whatever they thought they were accomplishing for jump scares.
I never even noticed the score until basically the movie was over. It was like essentially within the last 10 minutes of the movie I noticed the score, and then specifically like when it cuts the credits and you hear like the synth music coming in with like the flashy, you know, title cards and credits, I was like, oh, I guess that was what the score was supposed to be for this movie. But yeah, I couldn't recall it being used in like any scene very effectively throughout the whole thing. So yeah, it's I don't know. This is one of these ones that I wouldn't recommend you go see it in theaters. I do not think it's like as successful as like a Megan, which is kind of like the breakout, you know, Blumhouse horror movie of last year that came out in January or beginning of the year. Is it like a fantasy island? I don't know if I'd go that far either, but it's, you know, I wouldn't necessarily recommending rush out to see this in theaters. What about yourself?
Yeah, I'm gonna say pass on it. I mean,
yeah.
I took Exilia to this. She agreed to come to it. And I always figure with these kind of movies, even if we don't like them, I always tell Exilia I just want to laugh at her getting, jumping at jump scares when she's half paying attention. And I didn't get any of that. So this was a bad theater experience because we just blankly looked at each other like, what are we putting each other through right now? So, yeah, it's gonna be a hard not recommend for me either.
So neither of us recommend it, and with that, I think it's time to cut to the spoiler discussion for Night Swim. We are now in our spoiler discussion for Night Swim, so if you've not seen Night Swim, it's time to tune out and come back once you've seen the movie, or keep listening if you simply don't care. Now, Rowan, there are some spoilery things, I guess, the discussion this movie. Was there anything that comes to top of mind for yourself?
I mean, obviously, I think we did a pretty good job of kind of dancing around the fact that, I think most of the terror of this pool isn't even really coming from the pool. It's just coming from, like, undead people.
Yeah.
Apparitions, or they mostly just kind of look like ghouls, like zombie, like monsters. Appearing.
Not much personality to them. Yeah.
No, and I found like kind of the issue was like, they were just like generic looking. It's like, oh, we're gonna have a old bloated guy that looks like he's been sitting in a pool, and like a creepy, strangly haired, older looking lady. And
so could you even actually see those characters in your screening? Because for me, like all these characters that you're describing, they were very much just all like almost had like this black ooze or black gunk all over them, where in my screening it was so dark I couldn't even make out like really any features. Like the fact that you're even saying like a big bloated man, I wouldn't have even been able to say that. I'd say like, oh yeah, someone who's like bloated and something black, I
don't know, maybe I'm making all that up and my memory's just filling it in.
I remember there was hair for sure, like when they reach in the drain and, the hair kind of reaches onto the kid's arm. But it was the sort of thing for me, I was like, if you're going to use like these undead, and specifically with bloated, I instantly go back to like, let's say a Talk to Me, where you have like the bloated demon in that very much feels like it's waterlogged and it's been sitting underwater for a while. And if you kind of took like that stylistic approach with this, I think you would have been a little bit more successful. Whereas for me, this just felt like, I don't know, shadow, black, oozy things that, resembled humans. And, obviously at times we're going for specific things. It's just, for me, it was just, there wasn't really much to be scared at. Like, it's like a shadow, essentially.
Yeah, well, and, I thought for necessarily, like, these kind of scares they use, you talked about, like the boy under the diving board and the diving board, someone jumping on it, he looks, no one's there. Like, these are the kind of things that I think I would have enjoyed more in the movie. Like, I wanted to see more of the pool being haunted. Like, you've already committed me to go see this Night Swim movie. Like, I'm not expecting, this, like, art house piece that's gonna make me think about, I don't know, like generations of poverty and war or something. Like, I've come to see a haunted pool.
And to be fair, this movie isn't doing that either.
No.
No, it's definitely not art house or elevated. I would say the short that this is based on is trying to do something a little bit more like, prestige elevated horror. But like what we got here is, I don't know what this is. This is, they kind of lured us into a haunted pool movie, and we got a wishing well movie at the end of it, which I was kind of shocked by.
And that was my issue. Like, let's get, like even stuff, like we said, like the drains and all this stuff, like, you could have gave me at least some, like, silly-ass haunting, like, killing people shit. And, like, these, they're not used effectively at all. Like you said, whether it's totally ripping off better movies like it with the, just a recreation, as you said, of the George scene.
Yeah.
It's just, I didn't think it was that effective. Now, I did mention there was threads that I kind of wish they pulled at, which was, I did enjoy her, like, on the hunt to find out. Like you said, she visits, like, the older lady who used to live there, and it's, it gave me that feeling of, like, The Ring or something, like, discovering what the mystery is. And I don't know if this will be controversial or not. I haven't listened to anybody really talk about this. So I also kind of liked the idea of, like, the dad being possessed and in the house. Now, did it work? No, not really. But I was like, if we had went on this thread of like the dad being possessed by this pool, it's silly, but you could also make it, I don't know, enjoyable, I guess. Like, to me, I thought that worked. I was like, okay, this is kind of like The Shining. Like, this is like, you know, this house item is like possessing the father. He's going to kill the kids. That's always, to me, that's way more of a good time than what we got here.
I can't believe you're evoking The Shining when discussing Night Swim. For me, I certainly didn't want the possessed father plot line. And I think by like going to, it's Rebecca Summers' mother in the movie, kind of like the girl from the cold open. When you go and like visit her and you see that she has like a weird fountain that's also pumped from this well water that's kind of getting black, and she drinks it and then it starts oozing out of her eyes and stuff. I was like, all right, this is very much not the sort of movie I wanted. What's funny with this movie is, like, once again, I'll get back to the wishing well thing, is that my main issue coming into this movie was, how are they going to keep making people go in the pool? How are people going to keep dying and going in the pool to keep this interesting? How are you going to do this? And the simple answer is that they just don't. There's no death. There's no one really going in the pool, and basically all the horror is predicated from the father making a wish, which he doesn't make in the movie, nor does he toss a coin in the pool. His son tosses a coin in the pool that he drew a happy face on, but the son also doesn't say, "Oh, can you save my father?" It's literally like, I guess the pool just knows the father wants to be healed.
Yeah.
And then, so for a wish that you didn't even make, now you have to offer a human sacrifice, which, of course, this is the way that this water has been for decades. And, you know, people have been going missing in this small little town for, you know, a millennia, essentially. And it just kind of cuts back and shows like a bubbling pond. And I'm like, okay, that's fine, but it just created all these questions of like, okay, but how did they even build on top of this? And like, would this subdivision all have like the similar, would they be running on the well water? Would the water that is, you know, filling your pool, that they kind of point out that it's like, oh, this is a well water pool and it self-cleans and all this stuff, would that also be like part of your drinking water? Like, would the water be getting in your pool? Would it be seeping into your neighbors? It's just literally like, there is a way, if you want to go with like this cursed water that is throughout this town, that basically it doesn't restrict you to the pool narrative anymore. But they don't do that. And when they do that, they choose to do it via like possession, because they're like, oh god, we got to get away from the pool now. The father has to go for a drive, you know, but we want him to be creepy while he's driving. And it's just such a silly conceit for this movie that we're all lured here to see this pool movie. And once again, I wasn't looking forward to seeing how they were going to keep killing people in the pool. But it's just like, when you're seeing a horror movie about a cursed pool, you're expecting there to be some mayhem and some carnage in the pool, and there's nothing until the third act, when Wyatt Russell is just literally like, yep, I guess I'll die. Goodbye. You know, I'll sacrifice myself for this wish I never made because they were choosing to kill my kid. It's so strange. It's so sloppy. I have no idea like where they thought this would be like a satisfactory story, or it would like satisfy these audiences based on, you know, the marketing we had. Like, we see shots of like, I don't know, probably like 30 people in this pool in the trailer, and you're just thinking like, oh, it's gonna be like piranhas or something, you know, like, you know, there's gonna be blood in the water big time in this scene, right? And literally all it winds up being is like a kid clinging to Wyatt Russell's shoulders as he like sinks into the deep end, essentially, right? It's baffling, kind of, to say the least, with this movie. Yeah, it just basically never gave me at all of what I wanted from what it set up.
Like we said, it's really disappointing. And, you know, I think about, you know, we talked about the Blumhouse's last year adventure in January of like Megan, and I think about like, you know, how at least with Megan, they were smart enough, they killed a bunch of people, and they like kind of gave you the mayhem you wanted. That you know, even something like Megan, that is a pretty silly premise to begin with, but you're like, oh yeah, like, you know what, we're slicing, we're dicing, we're having fun, and yeah, like you said, it was just this was, you know, this could have been, take the haunted pool out of the movie. They could have literally just made like a sports drama movie, you know, about a guy rehabbing in a pool, and it would have been, oh, I'm sure someone would go see. I mean, I don't know, are
We wouldn't be reviewing it on the podcast.
No, but
you probably have a better shot of making a good movie.
They could have
well.
they could have opened it up. People could have double featured like that weird George Clooney rowboat movie with this movie to get like their boring sports into them. So yeah, I don't really know who this is for. And this kind of reminds me of, when we did our look ahead at 2024 episode, we did have that discussion about Blumhouse and, like who they're making these movies for, this weird area you're in when you're like kind of making everything, like PG-13. And, sadly, this kind of, I don't know. I feel like Blumhouse with Megan, took 2 steps forward, and I feel like this is bringing them like 3 steps back in terms of like this area of horror. Because like you said, I just don't think it works at all.
I'm surprised that it took you 30 minutes to mention PG or PG-13 with this movie, because this was very much one when I was watching it that I was like, oof, this is really affected by how it's rated, because like there's literally zero horror, like outside of the cold open. There's a missing cat probably 15 minutes into the movie, and then after that there's nothing. There's nothing that is like that would even put a chill up my spine if I was a 4th grader. It was so like, I don't understand how this is scary even as a PG movie, alone PG-13 or whatever it's actually rated. So it's very strange. One thing as well that I want to mention, I did some Googling after the movie because I was curious. I've never heard of well water pools before, and I was like, that actually is kind of an interesting horror conceit. Once again, if you're just going from like, I could have seen something like that working in The Ring, obviously, with the well and like filling something. Like, thankfully they don't go that direction with The Ring, but it's like, okay, there's this idea of like there could be trauma that's kind of seeped into the ground and it's just part of the town, it's part of the history. And I was like, that's interesting. So I started searching it up, and I was like, oh, what are the benefits of well water pools and whatnot? They're really bad for your skin. They produce murky water, which is not sustainable for pools. And in order to do that, you have to put in filtration systems and use lots of water softener. They recommend always checking the pH balance with strips before you go in the pool every single time, because there's a chance that it can just be, the balances could be off because it's groundwater, and you could just be literally diving in the hard water. So when I was thinking, I was like, that would have been a pretty inspired kill if they actually, instead of just saying like, oh, it has these mysterious healing properties, if it was like a chore to get it up to the standard of like what you would want as a pool, and also had some weird medicinal properties. But it'd be neat if they went and checked the pool and the pH balances were way off, and then someone dove headfirst into the pool that evening or something, and then it was just like acid. You got these kids that wanted to go skinny dipping, and they go for a night swim. I was like, that's the movie I wanted to see.
That's right.
But after like Googling for 2 minutes, I was like, oh, I can understand how you can make this premise kind of neat, and for what the movie that I signed up for. But instead, you just get people moping around the entire movie. So it was just once again, I'm just shocked by what I saw in like a bad way. The movie that I was mentioning, that I wanted to, say that it was clearly homaging, was there's a part in this movie where I think it's the daughter at first, she kind of sinks below the pool and she goes down too deep. I think it's during the Marco Polo scene. Maybe someone pulls her leg or something, and she sinks into the darkness, and she's kind of sinking backwards on her back, and she's looking up and above her, and you see just this little square in the blackness, and it's the bottom of the pool. And I was just like, okay, we've all seen Get Out. We all know The Sunken Place. Why on earth are you referencing that movie in this one? Did that bother you like it bothered me? Because it's very apparent in the third act as well.
100%. I mean, I know when we saw it, we both said, hey, Get Out, like right in the theater.
Yeah. Literally, get out. Get out of this movie. I don't want to see this. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just silly. Like in the mechanics, especially all the underwater stuff. I'm like, I don't care. I don't care what military your dad was in.
Oh, yeah. The Navy line?
Yeah, you're not under the water for like 10 minutes, like, and you're just holding your breath and you're good. Like, you don't even look like you're sweating.
You're forgetting a key detail there. She ties on a hose to
but she's got to let go of the hose once she gets so deep. Does,
yeah.
She's got to
go even deeper.
That's right. Are you willing to sacrifice? My real question about this whole movie is, why did any of it even happen? The cat died. They gave the sacrifice. Something.
No, the cat isn't good enough. It got to be human sacrifice.
It's got to be human flesh, which would still be a better movie if this pool needed human flesh to be fed human flesh.
I think I wanted to see a scene in this movie where you almost get like the old It movie where, oh my God, the drain in the pool's gone and it's like a whirlpool and they're sucking someone in. Or like, with this premise, I wanted it to be kind of silly. I'm not someone who likes camp stuff. You know, anyone who's a fan of the show knows that I'm like allergic to that shit. But when I go and see this movie that's a Blumhouse horror movie that comes out in January, I'm expecting there to be some teenagers that are getting killed in strange ways and you're cutting away before you see much blood. I'm expecting it to be cheesy. I'm expecting to kind of groan at it. All I got from this was boredom. There was nothing to this, like the fact that like when you were talking about like, oh, you missed like this plot about her wanting to be on the swim team. It's like, bro, I was so checked out within 8 minutes of this movie that I don't remember. I sat there and I watched the whole movie. I got more notes than Rowan has, but for whatever reason, I can't remember most of it. So it's just, I was so checked out by this movie that I'm just shocked that this is what we got. Because most of the time when we get a really bad Blumhouse movie, like in my opinion, like a Fantasy Island, I have so much at the time that I can just like lambast the movie for that. It's like, this is garbage. For this, it's just like, it's so boring that I don't have much else to say about it. So yeah, I guess that's it. I don't know if there is much more to say about it.
No.
Is there anything you want to say? No. Let's just get into reviewing this.
let's just review it.
Yeah. So if you're new to the podcast, our review rubric is nay, okay, yay, or slay. So Rowan, I think it's kind of obvious, but what would you give Night Swim?
Yeah, no, I'm gonna give this one an A. It's tough, man. I really, like, after I saw it, tried to reflect. I was like, you know, there's got to be a way I can wiggle it to like an okay. Like,
Rowan went on a vision quest.
A vision quest, and it just didn't happen. I think you said it the best. Like, your movie's called Night Swim. I need something silly. I'm thinking about, like, you know, when it's 3 a.m, I'm on Tubi and I'm seeing movies like, you know, Killer Toilet and like, you know, Death by Pants or something. I don't know. Like something like that would have been far more enjoyable. You know, if this pool had a folded up and it was actually a giant mouth.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, I'm all for that. It's actually turns out just to be a beast in this pond or something that looks like a pool. There you go. I'd be all right with that. I'd be like, you know what? No one else would dare do this. But yeah, what we got was just kind of bland. And like I said before, I just think it didn't know where it wanted to go. Is this a possession movie? Is this like a be careful what you wish for movie? You know, all these different things it was feeding us, and they never actually fulfilled us, and they never made us full, just like the pool. So yeah, a big nay. What about you, Colton?
Oh yeah, it's gonna be a nay from me as well. As I mentioned, this never gave me at all what I wanted in the movie, and I understand like sometimes it's just like, oh well, you went into the movie with these expectations, so it's like you're not really judging the movie for what it's a movie. It's like, oh no, I'm judging the movie for the movie. Don't get me wrong. I talked about how I believe they could have improved upon this movie, but what you got is just a very dull affair at the theaters. Like there isn't really anything really to grab onto as like a modern horror audience, and that's why audiences aren't enjoying this movie. There's nothing there. The fact that I'm saying that I wanted a more general Blumhouse affair of like silly teens and bad kills and cheesiness would have been better than this movie. It should tell you everything about this movie. It's just so dull that I will have forgotten about this movie easily in like a week's time. So yeah, it's definitely a nay from me. The one thing I'll say about it is that I just wish, I don't know if it needed to be the Tubi 3 a.m. movie with the pool actually turned into Jaws, but it was kind of like, how did you have a movie called Night Swim with an entity in the pool, and it's not even like It Follows, that third act with the pool, and It Follows, right? Which I think most people with It Follows would say that's probably a weaker part of the movie, but it's just kind of like, that's so obvious that you got to try and destroy the entity in the pool, right? No, apparently not. They don't try it at all in this movie. They just kind of sit around the entire thing. So yeah, it's a nay from me. And I, once again, don't recommend you go see this. Hopefully, if you listen to us discuss the spoiler stuff without seeing it, you enjoyed it. But it's not a fun time at theaters. And if you made it this far in the show and you're not following us already, you can do so at It Slays Podcast. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Slasher, Letterboxd, Threads, Blue Sky. I don't even know half of these platforms anymore, but If it's a social media, we're probably there at It Slays Podcast. And if you want to help support the show financially, like our horror hounds, Holly, Nicholas, Patrick, Mark, Stephen, Joy, Carvey, Dan, Brian, and Trevor, gain access to the Patreon exclusive show Stream Screams and get episodes of the main show 48 hours early, be sure to head on over to patreon.com/itslayspodcast and choose whatever tier works best for you. Rowan, there's some synths in this at times, I guess, but is anything making the playlist?
I get a feeling probably not, guys. I'm sorry if this is like, you already like have the original score downloaded. This is your all-time favorite original score. I mean, usually I'll take a pass through it again. Maybe tonight I'll go take a listen, but I don't remember being wowed by anything or being like, yeah, that's a banger. If you are looking for some bangers, go to Spotify to the It Slays Podcast horrific playlist. If you have any problems finding it, you can go to any of the social media that Colton mentioned just before this and go to the bio. Click on the Linktree link. It'll take you directly to it. We upload scores or licensed music from iconic horror movies we review, or just horror movies we love. So yeah, go follow the playlist and get your spooky music on.
And next time on the show, we're going to be covering, looking at the release schedule, Out of Darkness, which is that prehistoric horror movie, or possibly Lisa Frankenstein. I assume that's going to get a larger theatrical distribution, so it might wind up being that. If something doesn't crop up on Shudder or something else, doesn't grab our attention. I did
see a poster for Out of Darkness at the theater when I was there today. Yeah.
Okay, well, it might wind up being that. I don't know. I think they both come out like the first week of February or something. So, we'll check out whatever the next big horror release is. So for now, it's looking like it's Out of Darkness or Lisa Frankenstein. And with that, I think that about wraps things up for this episode. So until next time, I'm Colton.
I'm Rowan.
And as long as you keep listening, we'll keep slaying.